My father rewrote his will 3 weeks before he died. I only found out because the lawyer called the wrong number, mine instead of my brother's. That one mistake, 30 seconds, a misdialed digit, unraveled 2 years of careful, patient deception, and gave me everything I needed to finish it. My name is Thomas Wren, and I want to tell you about the year I spent learning that the family you think you have and the family you actually have are sometimes two very different things. My father's name was Gerald. He was 71 years old. He had built a modest but real life, a house he owned outright, savings accumulated over 40 years of careful living, a small commercial property he had bought in his 50s that generated steady rental income. Not a fortune, but enough. The kind of estate that means something to the people who inherit it. He had 2 sons, my brother Daniel and me, 3 years apart. We had never been close, not enemies, just different. Different cities, different lives, different relationships with our father. I saw him 4 or 5 times a year. Daniel had moved back to our hometown 6 years ago and saw him regularly. I had always thought that was simply a geographic fact. Daniel was nearby. I wasn't. That was the whole story. I was wrong about that. Dad was diagnosed with early-stage dementia 18 months before he died. Not severe at first, he had good days and bad days, moments of complete clarity followed by gaps and confusions. He was still himself in many ways, still sharp about some things, but vulnerable in ways he hadn't been before. Daniel stepped up. That's how it looked from the outside. He handled the appointments, the medications, the day-to-day logistics of Dad's life. I contributed financially, sent money for the extra care costs, called twice a week, flew in when I could. It seemed like a reasonable arrangement given the distance. I was grateful Daniel was there. What I didn't know was what was happening inside that arrangement. The lawyer's call came on a Tuesday afternoon in September. I was at my desk. I picked up because it was a local number from our hometown and I wasn't expecting anything urgent. A woman's voice, professional, slightly confused. She asked to speak with Daniel Wren. I told her she had reached his brother Thomas. She apologized for the misdial, started to hang up. And then, before I understood why I was doing it, I said, "Is this about my father's estate?" A pause. Careful. "I'm not able to discuss another client's matter." "I understand," I said, "but I am a beneficiary. Can you tell me, has there been a recent change to the will?" Another pause. Longer. "I would encourage you," she said carefully, "to reach out to our office directly to discuss your status as a beneficiary." She hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I booked a flight home for that weekend. Dad was having a bad week when I arrived. He knew me. He always knew me. But he was tired and confused in a way that was harder to watch than it had been on my last visit. He was in his chair in the living room, the television on low, a blanket across his lap. Daniel wasn't there when I arrived. He came by later that evening, surprised to see me. "Didn't know you were coming," he said. "Last minute," I said. "Wanted to see Dad." We had dinner, talked about nothing in particular. Daniel was relaxed, easy, the way he always was. Good company when he wanted to be. Nothing in his face suggested anything was wrong. I stayed 3 days, spent as much time with Dad as he could manage. On the second day, during a clearer hour in the afternoon, I sat next to him and asked him gently about his affairs. He got quiet. Then he said, "Daniel handles all of that now." I said, "What does he handle, Dad?" He looked at the window. "The accounts, the property, the paperwork." He paused. He said it was easier that way. I asked when that had started. He thought about it. "A while ago," he said. "Maybe a year." I nodded, kept my voice level. "Did you sign anything? For the accounts?" He frowned, the confusion coming in. "I sign things sometimes. Daniel brings them." I left it there. I didn't push. He was tired, and I wasn't going to put him through more. But that evening, after he was asleep, I went through the filing cabinet in his office. My father was old-fashioned about paperwork. He kept everything. 40 years of organized folders, taxes and bank statements and property records going back to when he first bought the house. I found the recent statements easily. The main savings account had dropped by $60,000 over 14 months. Not all at once, gradually, in increments that ranged from $2,000 to $8,000, spread across transfers and cash withdrawals and what appeared to be payments to an LLC I didn't recognize. I photographed every page. The commercial property, the one that generated rental income, had been transferred into a trust 6 months ago. The trust documents were there too. Daniel was the trustee. Dad's signature was at the bottom, shaky in a way it hadn't been 2 years ago, on a date when I now remembered he had been having a particularly bad stretch. I stood in that office for a long time. Then I closed the cabinet, went to bed, and lay awake until 4 in the morning thinking. Here's what I understood by morning. Daniel hadn't acted alone. He had needed Dad's signature, Dad's cooperation, Dad's vulnerability. He had needed access and proximity and time. He had used all three. But he had also needed a lawyer willing to facilitate changes to an estate without notifying all beneficiaries. And that was where the misdial had cracked something open. I flew home Sunday evening. Monday morning, I called an estate attorney. I told her everything. The call, the statements, the trust transfer, the LLC. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "This is serious. If your father lacked capacity when he signed these documents, they may be voidable, and the transfers to the LLC raise fraud concerns that go beyond estate law." She asked me to send everything I had photographed. I did that afternoon. What followed was 3 months of the most careful, deliberate work I have ever been part of. The attorney filed for a formal capacity assessment of my father, done gently, with his dignity protected as much as possible. The assessment confirmed what the record suggested, that during the period when several key documents had been signed, his documented cognitive state was inconsistent with informed consent. The LLC was traced. It belonged to Daniel, 2 years old, funded entirely by transfers from my father's accounts. Dad died in November, peacefully, in his chair, on a Thursday morning. I was there. Daniel was there too, on the other side of the room, and we sat in that space together without speaking, two brothers who both loved the same man and had done very different things with that love. I didn't say anything to Daniel that day, or at the funeral, or in the weeks immediately after. I waited. The estate went into probate. Daniel expected a straightforward process. He had the new will, the trust documents, the transfers already completed. He had spent 2 years building what he thought was an airtight position. He didn't know about the capacity assessment. He didn't know about the attorney. He didn't know what I had photographed in that filing cabinet on a Saturday evening in September. The probate hearing was on a Wednesday in February. Daniel walked in relaxed, his own attorney beside him, ready for a routine proceeding. My attorney was already seated. When Daniel saw her, he stopped moving for just a moment. Something shifted in his face. Not panic, not yet, just a recalibration, a reassessment. He sat down. My attorney laid out the case methodically. The capacity assessment, the transfer timeline, the LLC documentation, the signature dates cross-referenced against the medical records, the misdial that had started all of it. Daniel's attorney asked for a continuance. The judge granted 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, Daniel called me 4 times. I let every call go to voicemail. His messages moved through predictable stages: confusion first, then explanation, then something closer to pleading. On the 4th message, he said, "Tom, I need you to understand. I did what I thought was best for him. He was scared about the money. He wanted the property protected. I was just trying to help." I listened to that message twice. Then I called my attorney and told her to proceed. The will revisions were invalidated. The trust was dissolved. The LLC transfers were subject to a clawback order. The money that could be recovered was recovered and placed back into the estate to be divided according to the original will, the one Dad had written years earlier when his mind was fully his own. Daniel did not face criminal charges. The civil findings were enough to pursue that path, but I chose not to. That was my decision, and I made it carefully. Not out of softness, out of a calculation about what I could live with and what I couldn't. He was my brother. He had done something that I cannot fully forgive and do not intend to excuse. But I did not want to spend the next decade in courtrooms over it. I wanted it to be over. It is over. We don't speak. I don't think we will again. That loss sits with me sometimes. Not the brother he turned out to be, but the brother I had believed he was. The version of him that I had carried for 40 years that turned out to be incomplete. The house sold last spring. The proceeds were split as Dad had originally intended. The commercial property was retained in trust, and its income goes to a fund I set up in Dad's name, supporting a local program for elderly residents with cognitive decline. That felt right. That felt like the ending my father deserved. Here's what I want to leave you with. There is a particular cruelty in betrayal that uses love as its cover. Daniel didn't act out of pure greed, or at least, I don't believe he did. I think he told himself a version of events in which he was helping, in which he was owed, in which the proximity and the effort and the years of showing up entitled him to something the rest of us hadn't earned. That kind of self-justification is the most dangerous kind, because the person doing it almost believes it, and that almost belief makes them careless in a way that pure malice wouldn't be. He made mistakes, not because he was stupid, he wasn't, but because he believed his own story so completely that he stopped checking whether anyone else could see it differently. A lawyer dialed one wrong digit, and the whole story came apart. I think about that sometimes, how close it came to never surfacing. How many estates like my father's are settled quietly, the way Daniel intended, with no misdial, no curious brother, no filing cabinet searched on a Saturday evening. I got lucky, I know that. But I also made a choice, in the moment when that lawyer started to hang up, to ask the question that felt uncomfortable to ask. Ask the question, read the file, check the cabinet, because sometimes the truth is right there, one wrong number away, waiting for someone to pick up the phone.